Today is Tuesday, Asar B'Tevis, Tavshin Pei, Yehavchu Yomim Elu, L'Sasin U'Lesimcha U'L'Mayadim Tevim. May this day be transformed into a day of rejoicing and into a day of celebration. Please God, with the coming of Mashiach, speedily. This is the second in a series of shiurim on the topic of Yichuda Ila'ah, Yichudah Tata'ah, the upper level of Hashem's unity and the lower level of Hashem's unity. In the previous shiur, in part 1, we focused on the lower level, Yichudah Tata'ah. In a nutshell, we explained that in terms of Yichudah Tata'ah, the lower unity, existence has no innate reality, but it has value in relation to, first of all, Hashem's divine energy vested in His 10 utterances, Hashem's creating power as it is channeled and manifest in specific actions of creation, and it also has value in relation to Hashem's general creating power, in its generic form at its source. Let us now focus our attention to the level of upper unity, Yichuda Ila'ah. This is a higher level of existence's nullification, and by definition, Hashem's oneness. This is from the perspective of the level of godliness, which is beyond reduction into the 10 utterances, Hashem's transcendent, endless light, as it is on its own. Vis-a-vis this level, not only does creation have no independent reality, but also has no value or importance at all. All is before Him considered as naught. In the language of Kabbalah, kula kamei keloch shiv. To explain this more fully, let us quote a well-known Talmudic statement. The Gemara says, Kol mokim she'ato moitze gdulasei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ato moitze an v'sunusei. Where you find Hashem's greatness is where you find His humility. When we say Hashem's greatness, what are we referring to? Hashem's greatness is His ability to create existence from nothing. As another Talmudic statement says, the verse says, L'cha Hashem hagdula, says the Talmud, Zu ma'asev reishis. The greatness, the act of creation, is yours, Hashem. So we see that when we refer to Hashem's greatness, we are referring to His ability to create, the fact that He creates existence from nothing. Creation from nothing is completely outside the scope of human ability. As our sages state, Im miskansin kol boi ha'olam, livroi yitush echod, einon yechelin lizroik boi neshama. If all the inhabitants of the world would gather to create one mosquito, they could not give it life. Not only are humans unable to create from nothing, but they are also unable to fathom creation from nothing. This is why we refer to Hashem's creation of the world, ex nihilo, as His greatness. Hagdula zu ma'asev reishis. But creation is Hashem's greatness only in the human frame of reference. From Hashem's perspective, it is not greatness at all. On the contrary, for Him it is a great descent and constriction. Hashem reduces and contracts Himself, so to speak, in order to create the world. This is the meaning of the statement. Where you find Hashem's greatness, you find His humility. Just as in man, whose actions have value and importance in relation to his power of action, while in relation to his intellect they have no value, so too regarding Hashem. In relation to Hashem lowering Himself to vest His creating power in the 10 utterances, creation has value. Because through creation, Hashem's creating power finds expression and is actualized. However, in relation to Hashem as He is in and of Himself before, and so to speak, above having reduced Himself into His power to create worlds, the worlds have no value. Before Him, all is considered as naught. Kula kamei kelo chashiv. So we explained the concept of Yichuda Tata'ah and Yichuda Ila'ah. Yichuda Tata'ah and Yichuda Ila'ah, both perspectives of unity, the upper one and the lower one, are each connected to different spheres, to different divine attributes of Hashem. As we know, Hashem set up the Seder Ishtalshalos, the chain order of creation, in a way where there are 4 worlds, generally speaking, Atzilus, Bri, Yetzira, Asiya, the world of emanation, creation, formation, and action, and each one of these contains 10 divine attributes, starting from Chochmah all the way through Malchus. So in terms of spheres, Yichudah Tata'ah and Yichuda Ila'ah are each connected to different spheres, to different divine attributes. Yichudah Tata'ah, the lower perspective of Hashem's unity, is connected to the last of the 10 divine attributes, which is Malchus, kingship. Yichudah Ila'ah is connected to the divine attributes higher than Malchus, higher than kingship. This is in general terms. In Chassidus it's explained in more detail in terms of which specific spheres it relates to, but in general terms, Yichudah Tata'ah is connected to Malchus, kingship, the lowest of the 10 divine attributes, and Yichudah Ila'ah is connected to divine attributes which are beyond Malchus, kingship. To explain this, let us look at the difference between Malchus, kingship, and the other faculties as they are in man. Man, of course, is created in the image of God, so therefore the human condition can serve as a comparison to the divine, although of course the distance between man and Hashem is obviously immeasurable. In human terms, the soul's faculties, the koiches and nefesh, besides Malchus, kingship, relate to the person himself. For example, let's take chesed, kindness. When we describe someone as kind, it is a description of the person himself. To be sure, the virtue of a kind person is that if someone needs a favor, they will do it. But the character trait is of and related to the person himself. The kind person is described as such, even if there is no one on whom to bestow kindness. On the other hand, the very nature of Malchus, kingship, relates to one's projection onto others, ruling over other people. There is no king without a people. Ein melech b'lo am. If there is no one over whom to rule, the faculty of kingship is dormant and latent. Further, kingship is only possible over people who are completely separate from the king. For example, one cannot be a king over one's own children. But kindness could be felt and bestowed on close family members. In other words, kingship is less personal and more removed from one's soul than kindness. And for that matter, all other faculties, the emotions, and certainly the intellect. This is why Malchus, kingship, is the last and lowest of the soul's 10 faculties. Wisdom, Chochmah, is the first and also the highest in terms of quality and virtue. And kingship is the last and also the lowest in terms of quality and virtue. Because kingship is not a trait related to the self but to the other, governing and ruling over other people, therefore the soul's presence in this faculty is to a lesser degree than the soul's presence in the other faculties. In other words, faculties that are more related to the self are on a higher level than those related to the other. This is in human terms. In a similar vein, this is also in respect of Hashem. The divine light within the attribute of Malchus, kingship, is vastly reduced, while in the other attributes, the divine light is far more present. The purpose and core of the divine attribute Malchus, kingship, relates to Hashem reducing himself, so to speak, to associate with the other, with worlds, to create and direct them. And although the creation of the worlds is an extraordinary phenomenon, completely beyond the scope of human endeavor, and only He alone has the ability and power to create a being out of total nothingness, as the Alter Rebbe says in the Geras HaKodesh, yet this is only worthy to be lauded and extolled from our perspective. But to Hashem, it is a huge reduction. As mentioned above, we refer to the act of creation as His greatness, but from His perspective, it is referred to as His humility. This aspect, too, can be somewhat more understood from kingship as it is in man. Though kingship is the lowest of the soul's powers, its nature is such that the king is raised and elevated from the subjects. He is vastly superior to them, and all the people submit to him. And yet, so far as the king himself, his exaltedness over the people is the last, lowest, and most limited of his 10 faculties. Since the core of kingship is not a matter that relates to the self, but rather only to the other. So too, in respect of Hashem's governance of the worlds and its creation. Although creation, which is related to Hashem's divine attribute of Malchus, kingship, is to us a phenomenon of immense proportions, nevertheless, because it is all about the creation of worlds, the other, rather than the self, it is to him, to Hashem, a vast diminution. Now, as mentioned earlier, from the perspective of Yichudah Tata'ah, lower unity, existence has value and importance. This too is reflected in the parable of a human king, human kingship, in terms of the value of the people in relation to the king. To explain, the subservience of a people to a king cannot be so complete that they become meaningless. The people must have some value and significance. Otherwise, over whom shall he be king? What's more, the people's value and significance is so meaningful to the king that their number determines the greatness of his kingdom. After all, the difference between a small king and a big king is due to the difference in the size of the population. When the king rules over a country with a small population, he's a small king. When he rules over a country with a large population, he's a great king. Even more so, not only is their quantity relevant to the king's greatness, but also the stature of the people. The more people of his country are of a higher stature, noble, wise, and so on, the greater his kingship. The submission of people of high stature to the king attests to the king's greatness. The fact that the greatness of the king is determined by the quantity and quality of the people is itself an indication that the people have value and significance to the king. This was also demonstrated above regarding the stone's propulsion in relation to the force that propels it, which we discussed in the first shiur. The fact that the higher and the longer the stone is propelled, the more the strength of the force propelling it is expressed, is itself an indication that the action has value and significance relative to the force. These two levels, the divine attributes of Malchus kingship and the attributes beyond it, are generally related to Hashem's two names, Havaya, Yudke Vovke, and Adnai. The name Adnai, from the root of Odin, means master, and it points to Hashem's divine attribute of kingship. It denotes Hashem as he lowers himself to be manifest in his power of creation. The name Havaya Yudke Vovke refers to Hashem's divine attributes that are beyond kingship. That is why the name Havaya is sometimes referred to as Hashem's essential name, Shem Ha'etzem, meaning it refers to Hashem, so to speak, before he constricts his light and energy so as to be linked to the worlds. Hashem as he is transcendent and beyond creation. Hashem's name Adnai is therefore related to Yichudah Tata'ah, lower unity, and Hashem's name Havaya to Yichuda Ila'ah, upper unity. Relative to Hashem as he reduces himself and descends, so to speak, into his name Adnai, to be Lord and King over the world, the master of the worlds necessarily have some significance and value. And although also in relation to this level of godliness, all of creation is nullified, since their entire existence is purely the fulfillment of Hashem's utterances and command, as we explained at length in the first shiur, yet the negation and meaninglessness of creation at this level relates to creation's substance. Its substance is not an independent reality. But from the point of view of their value and significance, the fact that Hashem descends to be called Adnai, to be Lord and Master of the world, that itself proves that the world, although not existing independently, does have value and significance. Actually, this is the meaning of the Mishnah in the Ethics of Our Fathers in Pirkei Avos at the very end. The Mishnah says, Kol ma shebara HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'olamai lo yibira'oi ela lichvodei. All that Hashem created in his world, he created only for his honor. Each and every creature adds, so to speak, to Hashem's honor. Like a king of flesh and blood, the more numerous the people under his kingship, the greater his honor. So too in relation to creation. The more there are creatures, the more numerous the creatures, the more it adds to Hashem's honor. Moreover, just as the greatness of the king is also determined by the quality of the people, so too in relation to Adonai. As the verse in Tehillim says in Psalms, Hashamayim mesaprim kavod keil. The heavens tell the glory of Hashem. Although all that God created in his world was created for his honor, so everything tells Hashem's honor, including the earth and all lowest creatures that inhabit it, there is nevertheless a type of honor and glory that only heavens, meaning creatures of a higher level, can, so to speak, tell. So creation's insignificance and negation, as related to Malchus kingship and Adonai, is only insofar as not being an independent reality unto itself. But it still does have value. This is Yichudah Tata'ah. On the other hand, creation's insignificance and negation as related to Havaya and the attributes beyond Malchus, that negation is total. Not only in the sense of creation's non-independent reality, but more so, they are utterly inconsequential. All before him is as naught. This is Yichuda Ila'ah. The difference between the two above perspectives finds expression also in man's divine service, in terms of the level and intensity of one's nullification to Hashem. When man meditates on the fact that all of creation exists solely because Hashem creates it perpetually, at each and every moment, and he meditates on this not only in relation to the totality of creation, but also in relation to himself, that his entire existence is only due to Hashem creating him every single moment. And he meditates on this to the extent that he actually begins to feel this way. And, in addition, he also reflects on the whole purpose of his creation, which, as the Talmud states, I was created to serve my Maker. And this is even more pronounced according to the alternative text in the Talmud, which reads, I was created only to serve my Maker. And he contemplates this to the extent that he starts feeling this way. This brings him to a state of self-negation. He negates any personal identification as separate from Hashem. His entire being, all his abilities and faculties, are therefore directed and dedicated only to serve Hashem. His intellect is utilized only for the study of Torah. His emotion of love is dedicated only to love Hashem and what Hashem loves, and so on. Moreover, the person develops the palpable sense that all of his abilities exist only as a means to serve Hashem. But after all, this self-negation is only in relation to the substance of one's being. He exists only and totally to serve Hashem. But insofar as the value and significance of his being, the opposite is true. The fact that of all the creatures Hashem created, he chose the human being to serve him, attests to his importance in the eyes of Hashem, and man's superiority over other creatures. Furthermore, just as it is in terms of the superiority and virtue of humankind as a whole over the animal, so it is also in terms of the virtues unique to the particular individual. Even when one observes and feels that I was only created to serve my Maker, it does not contradict the awareness and cognizance of one's own unique virtues. Quite the opposite. Because of his superior talents and abilities, he is able to, and therefore must, serve Hashem at a higher level. However, man's commission to serve Hashem because of his superiority has value and significance only from the perspective of the lower unity Yichudah Tata'ah, relative to the level of godliness as Hashem lowers himself, so to speak, to create worlds. But from the perspective of the higher unity Yichuda Ila'ah, relative to the essence of his infinity, as Hashem is in and within himself, all is as naught. In relation to this level, man, the choice of all creation, and the inanimate, the inferior of all creation, are truly and equally insignificant. On this level, the fact that the Torah and its commandments were given to the human being is not because the human being has some special virtue over the rest of creation. Hashem could have equally chosen that animals should fulfill the Torah and the mitzvahs. Rather, it is because this is what Hashem desired, a desire which is beyond rationality. Looking at it from this vantage point, the negation of man stemming from this perspective is not only in relation to his substance and reality. He exists, but only for the purpose of serving Hashem. But rather, he is in a state of total negation, the negation of Yichuda Ila'ah. According to all of the above, we will understand the statement in the Yom Kippur prayer describing what happened in the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple in Yerushalayim in Jerusalem, during the Yom Kippur service. This is what it says. When the Kohanim and the people standing in the temple court heard Hashem's glorious and awesome name, fully pronounced, issuing from the mouth of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, in holiness and purity, they would bend their knees, bow down, and fall on their faces. Kneeling and bowing are expressions of self-negation, of submissiveness. The most virtuous aspect of the human is his intellect. When one bows one's head where the intellect resides, it expresses submissiveness. However, when one kneels or bows, the head remains above the body and feet, meaning that even then the virtue of one's intellect over the rest of one's abilities is still obvious and present. In other words, the submissiveness is not total. But when one prostrates, falling on their faces, the head and feet are even, to signify that one's submissiveness and self-negation is total, to such an extent that there's no superiority of the intellect over one's feet. The difference between these two modes of self-negation depends on the level of divine light that brings it about. When one feels the level of godliness that descends into Hashem's name Adonai, to be Lord and King of the worlds, one's self-negation finds expression in ordinary kneeling or bowing. The self-negation in relation to this level is mainly in relation to one's perception of the reality of the world and one's own existence. They exist only as expressions of Hashem and only for the purpose of serving Hashem. From this point of view, Hashem's greatness, as expressed through creation, and man's ability to serve him, point to their value. In this instance, the head and the feet cannot be bracketed together. Just as we discussed above in connection to the world, relative to the Adonai level of godliness, the heavens are more important than the earth. There is an honor and glory that only the heavens can tell. The same is true also for the heaven and earth, so to speak, of man. The human's heaven being the head, the abode of the intellect, is more important and superior to his earth, his feet. But when one feels Hashem's name Havaya, Hashem's essential name, the infinite divine light which is completely beyond the world, in relation to which the heaven and earth are really and equally nullified, the self-negation and bowing that follows from feeling this level of godliness is total, expressing itself in complete prostration, with the head and feet flat on the same level. Therefore, when they heard Hashem's glorious and awesome name, Havaya, Hashem's essential name, in its full pronouncement, and were overcome by its revelation, they would bend their knees, bow, and fall on their face, prostrate, total self-negation. But here a question arises. The above Yom Kippur prayer continues, stating that after falling prostrate, they would proclaim, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusay Le'olam Va'ed. Blessed be the glory of his kingdom forever. This seems puzzling. After all, as mentioned at the beginning of the first shir, the Zohar says that Shema Yisrael refers to Yichuda Ila'ah, upper unity, and Baruch Shem refers to Yichudah Tata'ah, lower unity. If so, once they reach the level of self-negation of Yichuda Ila'ah, the higher unity, to the extent that it caused them to fall prostrate, what place is there to say Baruch Shem? The essential point of the answer to this question is, even after experiencing the most exalted revelation of Hashem's supernal infinite light, beyond contraction, hearing Hashem's glorious and awesome name, which affected the person to become completely and utterly nullified, falling prostrate, having reached the level of the Yichuda Ila'ah self-negation, it is necessary to bring this revelation and self-negation down to earth. This is why, after experiencing this tremendously high level of godly revelation and total self-negation, they proclaimed, Baruch Shem Kvod Malchusay L'Olam Va'ed, to bring these lofty revelations and states into the reality down here below. In the following shiurim, we will focus on the psukim, on the verses Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem, and how we find the connection between the letters of Echad and Va'ed to Yichuda Ila'ah and Yichudah Tata'ah respectively, and also on an alternative explanation of Yichuda Ila'ah and Yichudah Tata'ah brought in Chassidus.